All right. So I'm not much of a public speaker, so I'm going to keep it short and sweet for you, okay? My name is Mike. I'm an addict. Um, I was born and raised here in Kansas City, Missouri. Uh, like Adam said, just not far from where he grew up in a small South Kansas City area. A little bit about my story. I was born in Kansas City. Born and raised in the church. I'm a pew baby, as they call them. Definitely a pew baby. My family went to church every Sunday, every Wednesday, every Thursday, and Saturday night for the young people's meeting. So we were in church a lot. And I appreciate that because I got a strong foundation in my Christian walk. Um, when I was about, let's see here, let me start there. I was raised primarily by my grandparents. My mother had me when she was 17, my dad was 19, and they just weren't ready to be parents. And so my grandparents, through the grace of God, raised my brother and myself and did a pretty darn good job of it, I would say. They didn't have to do it. I appreciate them every day for the sacrifices they made because they could have retired early. They didn't. They kept working to support my brother and myself, and I appreciate that about them. I was in college, and I'll start there. Growing up, I never felt like I fit in. I never felt like I belonged anywhere. I felt like I was too worldly for the church and too churchy for the world. And I was felt myself always in the middle, stuck in the middle, trying to find my place and where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And when I was in college is when I first started. I can't say minor drinking. I say I started drinking in college. Um, that's where I got the taste for alcohol. Uh, I would go to class with alcohol in my cup. Would just drink it every day, all day. Um, I had always battled with mental health issues. Depression has always been a battle of mine. At the age of 18, I made my first suicide attempt out of many attempts. So, depression and not knowing who I am and where I belong has always been a struggle for me. When I was 18 years old, my dad committed suicide in front of my brother and I, and that was a hard thing to deal with. Um, you know, he was there, even though my grandparents raised me, my parents were always present in my life. And so that was a hard thing to deal with his suicide. But God still kept me through all of that and still kept our family together. When I was the age of 21 is when I first started smoking weed. I was a late bloomer. I know a lot of you guys have earlier stories in that. I was kind of a late bloomer. I started smoking weed and drinking more heavily. Um, I got married at the age of 19. Very young, had my first son at 19, was married at 19. That marriage didn't last at all. And I can say that's partly my fault because I wasn't ready. I just wasn't ready for it. I took uh, I took drinking and drugging to a whole nother level after my first divorce. By the way, first divorce, I've been married twice. So let's just get that out the way now. All right. After my first divorce, I took drinking and drugging very heavily um, to the point where I wasn't getting up, I wasn't going to work, I wasn't supporting my family. I was mentally and emotionally unavailable for my children and my wife. Um, and so that was that. I moved to Seattle, Washington in 2008. And in 2008, when I moved to the West Coast, is when I was introduced to methamphetamines. Um, I would always say that I would never try meth. That was my whole thing. I'll drink, I'll smoke weed, but I won't do meth. Um, and I would, they say if you hang around in a barbershop long enough, you'll get a haircut. Well, that's exactly what happened to me. I was hanging out with this guy, and that's all he did. He was my plug, and I would get weed from him. This is before it was legal in Washington. And I would get weed from him, and he would always use meth. And he would always ask me, "Hey, man, do you want to hit? Do you want to hit? Do you want to hit?" I would say, "No, man, I don't do that. That's not me. I'll never go that low. I'm better than that." Um, and one day, my wife and I got into an argument. This is the second wife, by the way. Uh, got into an argument, pretty heated. Um, there was a bill I was supposed to pay. I think it was the rent, as a matter of fact. And I I ended up using it on booze and weed, and so yeah, that guys always pay your rent, okay? That's all I got to say. And so um, we got into a heated argument. I went over to this guy's house to chill out with him for a little bit to cool off, and he finally offered me some, and I accepted. That was off to the races. Um, I am by trade a licensed funeral director and embalmer. That's what I went to college for. And so at the time, I was managing three funeral homes in the Seattle area. Was the youngest manager at the time in that position. I was making very, very good money, great benefits, and I just blew it all away. Uh, I let drugs and alcohol take a real big hold of my life, to where I left my second wife um, to pursue drugs and alcohol, um, mainly meth. I left her. I left my kids. My Tell you how bad I was. My wife and my children, because I wasn't paying bills, I wasn't supporting them. They were homeless for about a year and a half while I was out there doing my thing. And that's something I'm ashamed of, because as a man, it's my responsibility to take care of my family. And that's something that I neglected. And today, my wife and I have my ex-wife and I have a beautiful relationship. I have a relationship with all my children now. Um, we are on good terms, and I'm thankful for that. I came back to Kansas City in 2016 after my grandfather passed. And I thought that coming to Kansas City would give me a new life. Okay, let me leave where I am. Let me leave Seattle. Let me go back to Kansas City where my family is, and maybe things will be different. But I can't. The only thing I couldn't change that I didn't realize is that I have to change myself. My location didn't matter. As long as I was still doing the things that I was doing, nothing was going to change. I just bought baggage from Seattle to Kansas City. That's all I did. And that's the truth. I bought a whole bunch of baggage with me. I came to Kansas City. My mother told me, she said, "You can live in my house. The only thing I ask is that you don't use while you're here. Don't use in my house. Don't use, period." Um, and that was her only rule. She said, "If you come home, I'll take care of you. I'll make sure your cell phone bill is paid. I'll make sure that you eat every day. Your clothes will be taken care of. There's nothing you'll have to worry about. Just come home and get better." Guys, I lasted about 2 days in my mother's house. I think that night, I, I lasted 2 days. I stayed the night, and she said, "The only thing is you don't leave by yourself." My mama said, "Do not leave by yourself. If there's anywhere you need to go, I'll go with you, or your grandmother will go with you." And because they knew that I was going to use. And so they said, "That's the only rules we have in the house until you get better." Well, the second night I snuck out the window, um, left the window wide open, and went out and did my thing. So my mother, she called me on my phone, and she said, "I noticed you're not home." I was like, "Yep." She said, "Well, that's the only rule we had, and you broke it." So she said, "Either I can get you a bus ticket back to Seattle, or you can find you somewhere to live." And my mother was not playing. I thought she was kidding, like, oh, it's not that bad. She said, no, my mother threw me out the house. She kicked me out. And I was like, me, mom, me, I'm your baby. Like, you're going to throw me out? Yes, she threw me out, smooth out. And didn't think twice about it. But I'm grateful for that because it allowed me to hit rock bottom. I was raised in the church. I started playing the piano and the organ in the church about at 12 years old, and played for a lot of big churches. And I'm not tooting or bragging my own horn, but um, a lot of people wanted me to play for them, and I equated that to my relationship with Christ. So I said, if I play, then doesn't that mean I have a relationship with God? No, because my works and my service to God does not equal a relationship with God. And that's what I thought for a long time. Well, God, I sing, I play. What else do you want from me? But He wanted me, all of me, the total me. And that's something I wasn't willing to give Him for a long time. I wanted to do it my way. I wanted to be my own man and make my own decisions. But I had to learn to turn my will and my way over to the care of God. I remember one time my ex-wife had asked me, what are you doing? Who are you working for? I'm like, who are you? Who am I working for? What do you mean, who am I working for? She said, yeah, everything that you do in the church and everything you do in your life, who are you doing it for? And at the time, I thought it was for God, but it really wasn't because, I mean, growing up, especially in the black church, you get paid to play. Like, it's a pretty good check. And so I, I was happy with just playing, get my little check every week from the church and going about my business. But I noticed that I was doing things for the wrong reason. I remember my oldest son sat down with me and he called me on the phone. He said, Dad, we need to talk. I said, okay. My son he is 19 now. He'll be 20 in February. So he was about 16 years old. And let me tell you, that 16-year-old boy had some wisdom because he sat me down and said, Dad, I need you to get your life together. I need you to do this because I have 7 children. So you have me and 6 others to think of and to take care of. And so I thought about it for a little bit. And he basically told me that until I get my act right in my life together, that he would make sure that him and his brothers and sisters were not in my life. That was a wake-up call. Because for a 16-year-old to sit a grown man down and to tell them about life and what it's really about and what I need to be doing, it was a wake-up call for me. My ex-wife passed away about 5 years ago. And I remember her telling me, Mike, I need you to get your life together because I don't know how long I'm going to be here. This is crazy because it was 2 weeks before she passed away. She told me, I don't know how long I'm going to be here. And 2 weeks later, she had a major asthma attack and stopped her heart and she died. And so I remember her telling me, and those words still ring in my head, I don't know how long I'm going to be here. And I wasn't in a position at the time to even take care of my children. My 3 oldest from my first marriage had to stay with their grandparents because I wasn't in a position to take care of them. When she passed, I was still getting high. I was still partying every day, still doing my thing, not concerned with anyone else, not worried about the welfare of my children, not really worried about the welfare of myself. And so it took about 4 years of really being in rock bottom after 7 rehabs and countless sober living programs. I can't even count how many I've been in. But for some reason, this last one, it stuck. I went to Rediscover. I remember one night I was having I told you I had mental health issues, and I had gotten high, and I was having what they call psychosis, and I was thinking people were chasing after me, and I literally spent about $200 on an Uber that night because I went from one hospital and then I thought they followed me to one hospital, so I Ubered to another hospital, thought they followed me there, so I Ubered to another hospital. So I'm in Kansas City. I ended up in Leavenworth, Kansas. Don't ask me how I got there. I ended up in Leavenworth, Kansas. I'm freaking out. I call my best friend Danny, who Danny's a good dude. I call my best friend Danny. I say, Danny, I don't know what's going on. I'm freaking out. I think there's people after me. You know, you got to help me. Danny lives in Olathe. Danny dropped everything that he had going on, drove out to Leavenworth, came and got me a hotel room that night, fed me, and the next day he talked to me and said, so what do you want to do? Do you want to keep living like this or not? And I said, no. I went to KU Medical Center the very next day, checked into the psychiatric hospital there, stayed there for about a week, got my meds under control. And then from there, I went to Rediscover. Spent 28 days there in inpatient rehab. That was in June 28th of 2023. I've been drug-free since, been alcohol-free since. I've gotten my children back. I talk to my children every day. We're closer than we've ever been. My ex-wife that is still living, we're closer than we've ever been. You know, my mother's back in my life. She's doing well. My grandmother, my whole family. I'm working now. I work for a place called New Beginnings, which is a sober living home. And, you know, I'm working for them as the Kansas City area manager now. I started off as a regular client, and God has done some extraordinary things in my life. From the time where I used to not be able to not even live without drugs or alcohol, God has really changed and did a transformation in my life. And I owe it all to Jesus Christ, because without him, I'm nothing. Without him, I can be nothing. Without him, I'm what Paul says, a wretch. I'm a wretch undone. And so I owe everything to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Um, I've learned that a relationship with God is so important. And I know we say higher power, but my higher power is Jesus Christ. And that's who my relationship is with now. I have a strong and firm foundation, and I know he's the Lord of Lords, the King of Kings, the everlasting God. He is everything to me, and without him, I would be and do nothing. And so I thank God because he kept my children, he kept my mind. Um, you know, there's times where I was an IV user, and so God didn't let me die during my addiction. He kept me alive. I mean, just God is so awesome, y'all, and he is just great because I don't even know how to explain him. I don't even know how to explain it, but he's just so good to me. We've come a long way. I am now, I'm 40 years old this year, and I didn't think I would live to see 32. My addiction was so bad. I didn't think I would live to see 32, but now I am driving. I have my own vehicle. God's blessed me with my own place. Um, you know, life can be good and it can turn around if you wanted to. You have to be, what's the word for today? Willing. You have to be willing. You have to have willingness. And that was the thing I didn't have. I didn't have willingness at first. But through tests and trials and through the hard knocks of life, it made me want to be willing. And I thank God for that on today. I just want to let everybody know that you can make it, that everything that you dreamed of is possible if it's in the will of God, that Christ is our kinsman redeemer. He's the one who came and died on the cross for us. He's the one who rose from the dead. He sits at the right hand of the Father, and he is an advocate before his Father every day for us, every day pleading our case, no matter what we've done, how bad we've been, how bad it has been, or what we have allowed to come into our lives. God is constantly before the Father, pleading our case and saying, yes, they did this, but I covered it by the blood. They did this, but because of Calvary, all their sins are washed away. And if you have not accepted Christ as your personal Savior, I admonish you to do so. I admonish you, because you will be a new creature. You'll have old things have passed away, and behold, all things will become new. So I couldn't do it without God. I couldn't do it without Jesus Christ. I couldn't do it without the indwelling of the Holy Spirit in my life. And with that, I'll pass. Thank you.